hello, everybody, and welcome. It is Sunday, Conspiracy Theory Sunday. I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory show or what. We got a few good topics to talk about. But before I go on, remember we are streaming live right now to X, Rumble, and YouTube, and you can subscribe, follow on any one of those platforms. I will pop up the website link here for you. GenXonX.com. Audio podcast, people remember that's GenXonX.com. I messed that up. I was a guest on a show the other week talking about Jim Jones, MK Ultra, CIA stuff, and I literally, my brain last week was so brain fog and I was last week, and I could not remember how to spell my website right as a guest on the show at the very end. Wow, but it's GenXonX.com. GenXonX.com. All the links are there. You can subscribe on the audio podcast platform as well. And I thank you very much for tuning in. Remember, thumbs up, guys. Thumbs up, strike the heart, share button, bookmark this baby, whatever you want to do. It's going to be an interesting show. We are going to talk about a couple of things. First things first, Jonacide, one of our regulars that shows up, he was at a horror convention in Seattle today. That is super cool. He said he got to meet Doug Bradley, aka Pinhead, and Mira Sorvino, nice, and the guy from Wishmaster. That is super cool. Okay, it's also May the 4th. May the 4th be with you today. And I went to a Star Wars convention. It was a small one back, I believe, 2011, end of 2011, something like that. And I got to meet, Peter Mayhew, who plays Chewbacca. There was Lando Calrissian there. There's a whole bunch of people who wrote the books, the extended universe books. George Takei was there. He's not one of my favorite. And I was like, what is George Takei doing at a Star Wars convention? But apparently he did some voiceovers for some Star Wars cartoons. Boy, obey. This is the May. So it was a fun convention, a little different than what I'm used to, because the whole LARPing thing and dressing up, I just feel weird about it. I think that's our society. That's one of the things, is because we're so engaged in movies and sci-fi movies like Star Wars. I think that's part of our I think we drive ourselves crazy, and it's like we want to believe that we're all these figures and we live in a fantasy world rather than a hard reality, which is why, by the way, I took like 4 days off of Twitter. I wasn't posting anything or anything like that. I just did things in the real world, walk my dog, clean the house, figure stuff out. Trying to do a totally different project, not talking about it yet too much, but something totally different. But it's going to take some development. But I probably will be doing Sundays for sure from now on for the conspiracy theory. And then if I can get a guest, Thursdays. I have to have a big chunk of time off in the week so I can get other projects and stuff done and work on things. So Sundays and Thursdays for sure. I don't know about the Monday. But before we get into our topics, you guys, and then May the 4th be with you. This Thursday, Walter Bosley's coming back to the show. I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about. I'll probably post the links by Tuesday for the show, so you'll see it on the YouTube channel. So Walter Bosley, and we are going to have a Monday show on the 12th. Jared and Nish are going to be back. These shows are all starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Don't know what we're going to talk about yet. Then we're also going to have this Conspiracy Theory Sunday on a Mother's Day. Maybe we'll have to talk about like Mother's Day conspiracy theories. I don't know, but we're going to have that. So Thursday, Sunday, Monday, and then we'll see what goes on after that. We're definitely going to be doing the Sunday shows though. Sunday conspiracy theory. It's a perfect day for that. Now, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the Pope stuff. We got Incognito. Hello. Yeah. Pope. Pope stuff. I'm not Catholic. There's a lot of people out there who's Catholic. We're going to switch here to share my screen because this is going to be a whole entire show about sharing my screen. Speaking of Catholics, we're going to get into this Pope. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Pizzabella. And apparently Pizzabella does not necessarily mean pizza. It means something like boisterous, chatting, talkative, something like that. But Candace Owens, who is very Catholic, just had her baby. Candace Owens had Roman Michael Farmer, born a few days early so that his father could potentially make it to conclave next week. So she says her husband meets up with Michael Knowles, who is part of the Daily Wire, and the guys tonight for a cigar to discuss conclave. So apparently Candace had baby early enough so her husband could do conclave. I don't get any of it. I'm not a Catholic. It's always so super, super, super confusing to me. But congratulations, Candace Owens. We're going to be talking about some strange stuff, but I want it to actually go. There I am right there on my feed. Here's what I did today to stay away from the internet. This is my video on my walk. I gave a longer video to my husband. There was a thunderstorm crashing in, so we had to cut our walk short. If you know me, I love lilac, so me and Petey went for a walk and we discovered we are walking and I found some lilacs. I'm walking Petey and there's a thunderstorm coming in. So we're gonna have to wrap this walk up real quick, Petey. But lilacs are one of my favorite flowers. So let's keep walking. There we go. That was my day earlier today. And I suggest everybody do that, whether you're getting out and going to a convention like John and I did, or you're doing something in the real world, but get out. Don't always be on the internet. Everything's not about X. I took 4 days off of X because my goodness, I needed it. Sean Thompson, how's it going? It is going great. We're about to give a quick talk about Pizzabella, and then we're going to skip into Jordan Peterson. That's going to be the focus of most of the show. I've got the Jordanetics book, and I've read through half of it almost. I think the end, there's a whole bunch of quotes, but I got to finish it. But this is an interesting book. I wanted to talk about this. Maybe we'll talk about it more later. But here, Pizzabella. Pizzabella, not Barrow. Pizzabella. Who is Pier Battista Pizzabella? He's actually a potential. There's many potentials to be Pope, and he's one of them. And he's Catholic. He's Italian, and I'm all for it. I don't know if he's progressive or not, but we're going to have a look to see. We're going to go to this video here. It is... Oh, wait a minute. I don't want to know how they replace...
Even though he's the Latin patriarch of Jerusalem, he's Italian. That increases his chances because we have had a Polish Pope, John Paul II. We've had a German, Benedict XVI. We have an Argentinian who is kind of Italian genetically. But here we have a born and raised Italian. If you look at the history of the papacy, yes, there's been North Africans and there's been an Englishman and there's some outliers. Generally, the prudence of the church has been, let's keep it Italian. Rome is in Italy. Let's keep it within the provinces of what we know now as the modern state of Italy. Pizzaballa has credentials from what he's done in Jerusalem, but he's also an Italian. He's not just an Italian cardinal who has a certain diocese in Italy. He has symbolically one of the most important dioceses or administrations in the whole world, Jerusalem. That's a big deal. Right now, only 12% of the cardinal electors are Italian. 12%. And if there's a preference to go back to older ways or to find some stability, and they're looking for an Italian, Pizzaballa really stands out as the preeminent Italian. If you want to go back to an Italian papacy, he's the obvious choice.
You got to pick
Even though he's the Cardinal Sarah is well known.
No, that's Cardinal Sarah, but here's another one about him.
He offered himself as a hostage in exchange for Palestinian hostages. He has called the actions of Hamas barbaric. He's also been critical of the Israelis as well. In a way, he's become a little bit of a persona non grata since the October 7th situation. Despite controversies, Pizzabella's diplomatic skills, commitment to dialogue have helped him maintain credibility across the various groups in the region, and his actions continue to be scrutinized by both sides in the Middle East. He says, quote, I am ready for an exchange, anything. If this can lead to freedom and bring those children back home, so no problem, my absolute willingness. So this is him stating, I will be a hostage in exchange for the children. That's heroic. That's impressive. We haven't seen cardinals or bishops do something so selfless. That self-sacrifice is commendable. It will be a difficult Easter. I was thinking of the loneliness of Jesus in Gethsemane, which is now shared by all of us. I love that. Let's bring our difficulties, our struggles, united to the loneliness, the sorrows of Jesus in Gethsemane. That's a true Franciscan spirituality. One thing promising about Pizzabella is that he doesn't drink appletini and listen to Elton John. That's promising. Yeah, I get the vibe here that Cardinal Pizzabella is not an appletini man. He seems to have gravitas, dignity, and it's not in this sort of saccharine, sentimental way. He's kind of got that Pius XII flair, that drip.
Okay, so that is Pizzabella. Sean Thompson says he's critical of Israel. He's never getting to be Pope now. Lucky if they don't waste him. Yeah, well, it should be interesting because we can get in. I've got some stuff from Jordanetics to talk about, some videos. If we have time, we'll get into the Hodge twins. We might stream them. They did a little bit of a discussion on Jordan Peterson, but it will be interesting because he's kind of remaining neutral, although he's criticizing Hamas, which we know who created them. He's also critical of Israel and what they're doing, because we all know we're not going to get into there. We won't get into that one right at this moment. But that is Pizzabella. He's considered, I think, an Italian, should be back on as Pope. There's another fellow, he's black. A lot of people want him because he's very, how should I say, orthodox, very, they're calling him based. They're calling him, very conservative. So he's a possibility too, but it would be nice to see an Italian Pope. It would be nice because we haven't had one for a while. So I think if you want to go tradition, that might be a possibility. So Pizzaballa. I think we need to look more into him, guys. Check it out. Now, we're going to get into Jordan Peterson. And I'm going to pop up my first video. What I want to say, I'm going to be reading from this. As you can see, pink. So we've got lots of things to go through. But in the description of this show, I have put a link to this author's playlist. He, back in 2018, when he did this book, he also did a playlist on YouTube of different live podcasts. His name is Vox Day. He's considered extremely alt-right. I don't know why. These people are always so crazy. You can check it out. It should be linked in the description. If not, you can look him up. He does like a whole list of videos about Jordan Peterson. And he goes through his books. And we're going to talk about who Vox Day is first, because this isn't just any kind of hoo-ha out there. This is a journalist, a guy who's highly intellectual, was in Mensa. He is one of the top 3 writing in his journalistic field. He is probably smarter than Jordan Peterson, if I could be honest. And once you go through his book and you see this stuff, you start to realize that Jordan Peterson's not quite as smart as you think he is. And I've already said I met the guy. I'm not going to go into detail about the specifics, but the first time I met Jordan Peterson, I was, doing care work at his family's house. He was standoffish and weird. The second day when I went in there is a little bit polite, but I didn't have conversations. I didn't really make conversations with them. I was just doing my job. I kind of ignored them, to be honest. And they just talked about a lot of business stuff. So, yeah, it's like, what do you do? But this guy's book is really good because what he does, let's see if I can get into, yeah, we'll share this one and we'll start with this video when we get in there. What Vox Day does is he actually points out some of the big did Jordan invite you to be part of the Masonic Lodge? No, they were too busy talking about business, and they were, I think, at one point trying to help, just normal relative stuff where you're trying to help someone figure out a playlist and they're older and they don't know. It wasn't. I could never say anything about his character from meeting him because ultimately it just wasn't long enough. It was 2 times, and I really just ignored them and went and did my work. I'm not gonna fangirl or idolize someone like that. It just, I like them, I like his stuff, but this book really, he's stressing the importance of 2 different ways to perceive Jordan Peterson. And a lot of us, when we first got in and looked at Jordan Peterson and was listening, we were listening to him lecture, okay, as opposed to reading his actual writings. And those 2 things are very different. And so when I first became aware of Jordan Peterson, I had already been criticizing Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau in Canada was coming out with crazy laws that basically were saying if you criticized Islamics, that was a crime. That was a hate crime. They could pull you through a kangaroo court. And then, yes, Vox has a website that publishes comic books. He does. He's a super smart guy. Super smart, highly intelligent guy. We'll talk about who Vox is in a moment. So because there's probably some people who are going to criticize as some right-wing Nazi, which he's not. So anyways, like I said, there was laws Trudeau was bringing in, and all of a sudden, this out of nowhere, Jordan Peterson guy comes up, and he got famous for video clips that were shown of him on the internet because he was just, arguing on campus with these liberal type students. Then he was on Joe Rogan and all this stuff, and people really started to become enamored with him because he was standing up against some of these compelled speeches they were doing. Is some bill which is going to compel you to use people's pronouns, compel you to speak certain ways, and he was arguing against it. And it felt like, well, finally someone who's sane is speaking up for things. And so people start to listen. And then when you went on to his YouTube channel, you realize he had tons of lectures there. But listening to Jordan Peterson lecture and say certain things is very different than looking at his writings. And what Vox Day does is he looks at his writings and he looks at his character and he looks at his actual actions and how he behaves in contrary to what he's claiming. And the fact is that there's some kind of like those 12 rules for life, his famous book, seems to be a mask. And once you read behind the rules in the book, you realize something else is going on here. So let's talk about who Vox Day is first. I forgot to bring that up. He's an American activist and writer. His real name is Theodore Robert Beale, commonly known as Vox Day. He's a right-wing American activist and writer. He has been described as a far-right white supremacist, misogynist, and part of the alt-right. I would say that is false. Yeah, he was born in Minnesota. I would definitely say that is BS. That he is I don't think he is at all. Not at all. He is into video game development, but he wrote. Sorry, guys. He wrote for WorldNet Daily opinion column. He has written for many publications, and I'm trying to get you exactly. I mean, he's got like at least 15 books. He's got a professional publishing house. The foreword in this book, by the way, is written by Milo Yiannopoulos. You should know who he is. And Milo specifically points out how Jordan Peterson's a hack, he's fake, and how he throws people under the bus and backstabs people. And he's not a very good person, and that he's fakes. He literally pushes that. I think they say he's a misogynist because he's involved in Gamergate. You know how women trying to say that all these gamers were sexist. It gets so crazy. Fox Day was also a part of Mensa. He's married with several children. He lives in Canton of Vaud in Switzerland and owns Cressier Manor in the canton of Switzerland. Interesting. They call him a Christian nationalist, but I don't. People misuse that one. He's basically just pro his own culture. And of course, you can't be pro Christian these days. He was educated at Bucknell University, writer, publisher, game designer, activist. And let's go to his website. You will realize. Here we go. Yeah, it's totally old school. He calls it Vox Populi. Very interesting. But a very smart guy and really good at being very thorough. That's one thing that's really important to know, is that he's extremely thorough on his writings and his meanings. And he points out how Jordan Peterson isn't thorough. So liked him because he spoke out against compelled speech. And then once, Jordan Peterson started having his really weird breakdown and behaving very strangely, he got famous, he got big. But here's the one thing you notice. At that time, it was close to 2020. And a lot of people who were conservative got the kick off of YouTube. Like they disappeared from YouTube. Milo Yiannopoulos got canceled. Cernovich got trashed. Even seen people like David Icke kicked right off. You've seen people like Faith Goldie, who worked for Rebel News. She was tossed. Stefan Molyneux, who apparently actually was the one responsible for Jordan Peterson's original fame, for bringing him into the forefront and showing him up. Stefan Molyneux got canceled, and nowhere was Jordan Peterson defending these people. In fact, he threw all those people under the bus and took over. And so when I look back and realize, the overflow of what was happening and all these people getting canceled, Jordan Peterson never got canceled. YouTube could have just took him off if they were so threatened by him. But what you realize is Jordan Peterson never actually he was going against certain bills and certain things, but he never goes against the crux. He never spoke out against the vaccination. In fact, he got it. He never spoke out against, like, for instance, Faith Goldie. They kicked her off, fired her from Rebel News, and she was trying to attend this meetup or whatever where they were all speaking, and people canceled her from that. And he never once spoke up for her because they were all saying she appeared on this white supremacist podcast and all this BS. She did appear on a podcast, but that doesn't mean she supports it. And not once does Jordan Peterson stand up for people that he says he likes. In fact, with Milo Yiannopoulos, he'll say he was a nice guy and thought he was great, wrote about how great he was. But later on, you see Jordan Peterson's like, I don't really know him. And there's a lot of lies that Peterson is caught up in. And you start noticing Peterson, the more famous he gets, the more he starts looking weird. He starts looking narcissistic. And I liked him because he was speaking out against these laws. And I thought, oh, great. This intelligent guy is there speaking for us. But I start to notice strange things. Like his daughter was trying to start her meat eating stuff. And it seemed like his daughter was trying to be famous off of him. She runs a podcast. It's not that interesting, to be honest. I mean, maybe it's more. She gets the better guests probably than I would ever get. Good Lord. Austin, thank you so much for your commentary. It's very true. He says he wants to silence anyone who criticizes the big I. He has meetings with the presidents of it. Yes, he has for I, and he works for Ben Shapiro. Absolutely. That's what we know about him now. But here's the thing. He starts going bizarre and weird, and he starts acting strange. And I'm going to play this video clip here for you, and we'll get into Jordanetics because I want to go through some of the things here that Vox Day says about him. And remember, that link is in the description. We're gonna have people. Yeah. Okay, we'll get into that. There's weird things about his daughter. You got to remind me to talk about his daughter because I met her. She was very pleasant. I'm going to say she was not rude at all when I met her. She was there. very pleasant. She was rude. She's blocked me and she's rude to me on X, but in person, nothing bad to say about her. I'm going to be really honest. We're going to be reading stuff from this, but first, in this one, now I'm not a Sam Harris fan. He's an atheist. Perfectly fine. But Sam Harris actually poses a really good question to Jordan Peterson about what's his religious belief. And this is how you know I start getting suspicious of him, that he's not actually conservative. He's always a liberal. Maybe we projected conservatism on him because he was speaking out against certain things, but that he won't answer the question. And I think right here you start to notice that there's just something wrong mentally with Jordan Peterson. But if you're looking at his lectures and you're looking at things elsewhere, you can't see it. And you can see it in his writings, and you start to see it in some of the debates that he has. And he explains it away. But let's watch this clip because you see how erratic he gets here, I think.
This was my hair 6 hours after wash day. Now this is my hair on day 3. I've tried every oily hair product.
What is the God that you act as though he, she, it exists? And what is the God-shaped thing I must have in my life to prevent me from being a, quote, real atheist?
Well, okay, first of all, I have to point out that there's no possible way I can answer both those questions in 2 minutes.
Well, it's the same question. I mean,
yeah,
what do you mean by God? So
okay,
I was not hearing in that list of attributes a God who could care if anyone masturbated. I was not hearing a God who...
Depends on what else is stopping you from doing, Sam.
Sorry, I missed that.
I said it depends on what else it's stopping you from doing.
Well, okay, so it's important to live.
Seriously.
It's important to do something other than masturbate.
Yes. Yes, which actually constitutes a problem for many people.
Which is harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of funny. So I thought that video, there's a video where Jordan Peterson gets really nasty with the audience, and he freaks out because he won't answer whether or not he believes in God. And he gets, and I'm trying to find this clip. It was on, and I thought that was it, but apparently that's not. Apparently they're just talking about masturbation. But he gets really angry and he starts yelling at the audience like, you don't know, you don't even know your own self, because he won't answer the question about whether he believes in God. And he has this particular way of weaving out of answering questions that nobody really notices. They think it's a genius. They think he's, mentioning something crazy. And I have this clip here that I'm going to show you as an example. I've showed it before on the show. This clip is an example of how Jordan Peterson tries to get out of answering whether or not he believes in God. He starts going, well, what do you mean by that? And he starts to try to make things like he's doing something profound, but he's just tricking you and diverting you because he probably doesn't believe in God and his audience does. And he's trying to he's trying to, trick them. So here, I'm going to show this one again, and you'll see exactly how he tries to sound profound, but it's just idiot word salad. And over again in this book, Jordanetics, it's like word salad after word salad after word salad. Check it out.
Begs the question, what do you mean by happen? Because when you are dealing with fundamental realities and you pose a question, you have to understand that the reality of the concepts of your question, when you're digging that deep, are just as questionable as what you're questioning. So people say to me, do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean, except belief in God. And I think, no, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks.
So, hey, what do you mean by do? What do you mean by you? He's trying to make things sound more profound. So if you have already bought into that, he's presented himself as an intelligent professor, you're like, wow, that is profound. What do I mean? He knows. We know what you mean. We say, do you believe in God? And it is a fair question to say, well, which God? Do you believe in the Christian God? You know, the one that all your audience believes in. You can say, yeah, I do believe that there is a deity up there that's created us all, that's, you know, watching us or whatever. He could say, I vary. I don't believe in this or that. And I question these things, but he won't answer it at all. And that's people who are Christians should be suspicious about somebody who won't answer it at all. It's a straightforward question. And there's nothing mysterious about the word do or you. You is referring to you, Jordan Peterson. You. What do you mean by Jordan Peterson? Do you mean the solid flesh Jordan Peterson? Do you mean the Jordan Peterson that writes bullshit in my books? Do you mean the Jordan Peterson over here? Do you mean, like, he's trying to sound profound and it's silly. Very, very silly. What is Bill Clinton? It's Clintonian. And they actually highlight this are as harmful in this book, that it's very Clinton-y. What is? What is I? Woo, right? So that's one of the ways that he deals with it. Okay. So we get into this book. And my first little tag, Vox Day points out 3 things that he feels about Jordan Peterson's persona, that he actually is comparing Jordan Peterson to almost like a guru, like like some kind of spiritual guru, like Deepak Chopra or something like that. You know, he's comparing them to that. And it actually has that feeling, but they've sort of put the persona of professor, intelligent professor over it. It's like an act. It's like a mask, right? And he actually says there's 3 things about Jordan Peterson that he doesn't like, and he says he exhibits ignorance, narcissism, and mental illness. Ignorance, narcissism, and mental illness. It's alluring, and it's like, okay. Let's have a look here. He says Jordan Peterson's books and lectures are punctuated with a large number of self-referential details. This is in reference to narcissism. So he does a lot of self-referencing rather than just quoting exact studies. He's literally projecting himself all over things as if that is the absolute truth in the study. And he'll throw in a study every once in a while in his books, like this study says this. And what you find out is the study actually doesn't say that. It says the total opposite. And he has a real issue with reading statistics. So he goes on to say, but Peterson's reliance upon his personal experience is often improperly utilized. Time and time again, Peterson presents his own unique life experience as a definitive foundation for the common state of all mankind. That's really typical in the kind of culty, sort of almost religious foundations. And he gives a couple of quotes from 12 Rules for Life. Here. Let's see which one. We'll just read one of them. He said, I slough off a lot of my past. In a small town, everyone knows who you are. You drag your years behind you, like a running dog with a tin cans tied to its tail. You can't escape who you have been. Everything wasn't online then, and thank God for that. But it was stored equally and indelibly in everyone's spoken and unspoken expectations. So he has this idea, and he thinks that that's how it is. Everyone hates small town living, and of course that's not true. And he equates that to like low, and I think Jordan thinks he's talking to stupid people for the most part, who are all low, like at the bottom of the heap, because his 12 rules for life is supposed to be an antidote to chaos, right? Turn chaos into order. But he's got this weird philosophy behind that. It's really strange. It's like you either have order or you either have chaos. But he actually says you can have too much order and there's another order in between. It's a really bizarre, strange way of explaining things, he calls. So if you take chaos and you apply order to get rid of the chaos, he it's hard to explain this because it doesn't really make sense. But he says you can have too much order. There's a different kind of order. And what it sounds like is the different kind of order is his order. You know what I mean? Don't do the regular order of other things. Do my order. And there's not a lot of study applied to this. It's more like he says he's not ideological, but the whole book reeks of ideology. His ideology. Right? So, and as mental illness, he references, Vox Day says, Peterson readily acknowledges that he and a number of his family members suffer from significant clinical depression and anxiety. Now, he's going to say it's brought on by food, but I'm not so sure. Okay. Although he does not name a specific pathological diagnosis regarding his illness, one important clue in his admission to having a tendency to habitually lie to himself and others at an unusually early age. And he does a quote where he talks about how he lies all the time in 12 Rules for Life, which is, I mean, some people lie, but if people lie all the time, that's strange. Most people don't lie constantly all the time, continuously. Like that's I have had a few friends who were habitual liars and they were eventually diagnosed with a personality disorder. Just saying, I'm not diagnosing Jordan Peterson. I'm not a clinical psychologist. We won't be doing that. But then, I mean, Vox Day, there's a lot of people when Vox Day did this criteria and criticism of Jordan Peterson, they come in basically to criticize, like they've lapped up. I wouldn't be surprised if someone leaves a message on this video and says, oh my God, you can't be insulting Jordan Peterson. He's a god, but he's not. And just that one little video that I showed to you shows how he weaves out of answering a very simple question and that he weaves his own narratives. So here we go. We've got some other elements highlighted here. Like a lot of this I could skip by because it's people's basically them loving Jordan Peterson. But here's one thing that's interesting to note about Jordan is he claims to not have even read the Bible when he was lecturing on it. Now, I haven't read the Bible, but guess what I'm not doing? I'm not lecturing on the Bible. I'm not lecturing on it as a university professor without having read it. And so maybe he's read it now. I don't know. But Jordan Peterson is now, I mean, he's continuing this, throwing people under the bus, saying Christ is king is totally basically sinful to say because the people who are using it aren't. He's declaring that they're not really Christ loving, and it's BS. It's absolute BS. It's all projection. Again, constant projection in this book of his. So let's see what he says. The Exodus. Owen Benjamin said, the whole Peterson thing has made me seriously evaluate how I was easily tricked. So Owen Benjamin says he was tricked by Jordan Peterson, like many of us were. I could have replaced his message that I held with such high regard with 2 sticky notes that says, clean your room and gulags are bad. He says, much respect for the early clarity on this one, Vox. I listen to people who are accurate and your batting average is revealing itself to be high. So Vox says, despite the unhinged response of his true believers to the various videos, not all comments were negative. So he has some people who are saying it's an excellent analysis. So that was just one from Owen Benjamin. Now, I actually have this suspicion because like I was saying earlier, that so many people were canceled early on and Jordan Peterson wasn't, that he already had a deal long before COVID, long before he went crazy, long before he tried to get off benzodiazepine. He was put there for a reason, to take up the narrative so that conservatives would follow a certain narrative. And because there was a lot of people who were coming up with conspiracy theories or pointing out problems with the system that were wiped right off the charts. They were cleared out and you couldn't even find them on the internet. Like I was saying, Faith Goldie, Jordan Peterson threw her under the bus willingly, even though he knew her, and he destroyed her career. So Vox says, who is the real Jordan Peterson? And this is a quote from Jordan Peterson. Reading Jordan Peterson, you got to read what he says, because once you read what he says, you're like, what the fuck is this gobbledygook? It doesn't make sense. When you're listening to him orate and speak, he can kind of be like a little preacher, and he can weave his way out and sound, more pronounced than what he is. But once you read some of the words, it gets weird. Okay. He says, this is Jordan Peterson quote, "I think I have discovered something that no one else has any idea about, and I'm not sure I can do it justice. Its scope is so broad that I can see only parts of it clearly at one time, and it is exceedingly difficult to set down comprehensibly in writing." So it's gobbledygook. Okay, so he thinks that Jordan Peterson's a pathological liar. But he says, is he a pathological liar, or is he a prophet, philosopher, a shaman, or a charlatan, hoax or healer, great intellect or grandiose pretender? These are the questions that this book intends to answer. So he goes over some of the biggest objections that people have of Jordan Peterson, saying, but Jordan Peterson, and he answers it. And I'm only going to choose one. There's like, first, people object. They say that strangest things, and they're really non-arguments. People will say Jordan Peterson is a complex thinker with a Platonic approach that is easily misunderstood by those who don't carefully follow him. You just don't understand him. And Vox answers by saying, is it true that Peterson is inclined to excessive wordiness? Peterson, what he's basically saying is, he's not a complex thinker. He's just doing wordiness, using big words and word salad to trick you, essentially. Objection 3. You're just jealous of Jordan Peterson's success. He's basically saying, look, he tells you exactly about his life. He says, he's like, I am not jealous. There's nothing to be jealous of a man that's clinically depressed, pathological liar who has written all of 2 books at that time too. Now he's written a 3rd, both of which are meandering, incoherent tosses of word salad. I don't even know how many books I've published, probably 15. And then he talks about his epic fantasy series and stuff that people have compared to Lord of the Rings. And he says, no father would envy what Jordan Peterson has been through with his daughter's various ailments. He said, also, my childhood friend didn't kill himself. I don't envy that. He says, if I was jealous of anyone's intellectual success, it would be Nicholas Nassim Taleb, who has far more money than Jordan Peterson, written more bestsellers. So he's saying he's not jealous of Jordan Peterson. He's a very articulate writer who likes to look at the facts, and he's just telling you what he sees because he hasn't been hoodwinked. He hasn't been hoodwinked. People say, objection 2, I'm an intelligent person. How can you be fooled? Intelligent people get fooled by this stuff because they're more likely to go, oh, let's just listen. And I did the same thing. Even when I knew he's on benzodiazepines, I'm like, let's wait and see if he gets straight. But at the same time, I was going, this guy's weird. He's wearing all these weird suits. He kind of is coming across as like a caricature. Like what's going on? And he was changing from a normal, professor to almost like this hoity-toity, like, oh my gosh, I'm dressing so fine, and just like strange. It's like he wasn't himself. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of objections going on, and there's a lot of questions. People are questioning it, and he answers all of those questions in here. But he finds that this guy has depicted so many he is contrary. And I want to find you some of the quotes from his book, because that's the most important, because I can't go and read the whole entire book. His thing about lobsters, totally wrong. He talks about lobsters and stand up straight and that we're descendant from lobsters, and we're just not. We're just not descendant from lobsters. Lobsters diverted way long before humans were around. Dr. P.Z. Meyer says of Jordan Peterson, we diverged from lobsters in evolutionary history about 350 million years ago. Common ancestors? No, that's ridiculous. 300 million years ago puts us in the early Carboniferous. Does he think lobsters evolved from sharks? There's just no evidence that, we evolved from lobsters. And I'm going to guarantee you that Jordan Peterson just drops a link or some kind of reference and says that backs him up, and it probably doesn't. He's literally espousing his own religion and then telling us he's not ideological. He misquotes when Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. He goes, he wrote it somewhere 1880, 1890 something, and it was written in 1848. And anyone who knew anything about Communist Manifesto would know, and had studied it and said they were profound, would know when it was written. By 1890s, I think Karl Marx was dead. He totally gets it wrong in some of the stuff he talks about. Like, there's so many errors. It's actually like, what? What are you talking about? Okay. Here we go. It's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And I've got some quotes from his book that are his book's Maps of Meaning that were really, really bizarre. So here he says, Peterson suggests something very interesting here, namely that chaos is both where the bottom folk are bullied without mercy and the source of tyranny. Interesting. However, with his customary inconsistency, he has also made it very clear that tyrants dwell at the top of the dominance hierarchy. So he says both. That the chaos is at where the bottom feeders are, and that's where tyranny comes from. But also, there's tyrannies at the top. I don't know, does it climb up to the top? He describes two realms in detail, and he only alludes to a third realm. So in his book, he describes order, which is the domain of tyrants, the top of the dominance hierarchy. Then he describes chaos, domain of the depressed, the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. Then he describes the middle way, which I'm assuming is his way. Domain of balance, the more perfect order. And the minute someone says perfect order, that's the red flag there. That's the red flag. He's actually describing. And so when you read it, as opposed to hear him saying it, you're like, oh, he's actually trying to describe his utopia of a perfect order, which is actually usually always becomes tyrannical, right? So he says, although Peterson does not give a name to the social area which one should aspire when standing up and assuming the burden of the world, because he's always taught all these young men to make your bed, stand up, and do all this stuff. You think there's these simple rules, but once you read the rules and you read his book, you understand there's all this behind the simple rules. There's all of Jordan Peterson's religious, ideological bibble babble that doesn't make sense. The rule itself makes sense. Yeah, I should make my bed. Yeah, I should organize my day. Yeah, maybe I should pet a cat or something. But when you actually go into depth of what he says about it, yeah, it's bizarre and it's strange. So I highlighted this. Some of the reason why. So here we go. He says, Jordan Peterson's first rule assumes several things. First, you are an animal. Second, in some way, large or small, you're at the bottom of your social hierarchy, or you wouldn't be reading his book. And I'm going to tell you right now, I know tons of people who bought his book who were not at the bottom of the social hierarchy. And they weren't stupid. They're just looking for something magical. So we're all looking for something magical. He tricked us. Good job. Okay. And he says, you want to rise out of your chaotic circumstances. And Peterson wants to help you, but only so far. As you improve your posture and you stand up and reject the oppression of others, you need to be careful to avoid rising too far and run the risk of turning into a tyrant. That's what he says. The Petersonian ideal is to become a balanced lobster, a middle lobster, a productive lobster, but not a dominant lobster. Peterson's first rule recognizes the reality of humans and social hierarchies and on the superficial level. It is potentially useful if prosaic advice for the genuinely ignorant. Standing up straight with your shoulders back is good for your posture, both literally and metaphorically, but it isn't the real point of the chapter. Beyond his shallow platitudes, the deeper point of the chapter is to introduce you to first of many of Peterson's paradoxes. You are an animal. Dominate your environment until you achieve protected status in the middle of the herd. Find your place there, but don't go too high. Join the pack. See safety of anonymity in the middle. That's literally what he's saying. Be mediocre. Right? And I'm trying to... There were some really crazy quotes from his book that I think I've missed here. And I want to... Here it is. Here, I had it highlighted. And this goes back to people saying his daughter... We had a comment in the room that says his daughter smanged Andrew Tate. Very disturbing. Pretty sure it's real. But Jordan Peterson has a weird fascination with his family. He also has a weird, crazy fascination with Soviet art. He has it all over his walls. He had like 37 different colors in his house. He's obsessed with the Soviet Union. He actually named Michaela after Mikhail Gorbachev, if I'm not mistaken. So here's this quote from his book. And I'm so sorry, it's really disturbing. He said, I dreamed I saw my maternal grandmother sitting by the bank of a swimming pool, which was also a river. In real life, she had been a victim of Alzheimer's disease and had regressed to a semi-conscious state. In the dream as well, she had lost her capacity for self-control. Her genital region was exposed dimly. It had the appearance of a thick mat of hair. She was stroking herself absent-mindedly. She walked over to me with a handful of her pubic hair. Ugh, this is so gross. Compacted into something resembling like a paintbrush. She pushed this at my face. I raised my arm several times to deflect her hand. Finally, unwilling to hurt her or interfere with her any further, I let her have her way. She stroked my face with the brush. Oh my God. And I said like a child, she said to me like I was a child, isn't it soft? I looked at her ruined face and said, yes, Grandma, it's soft. That was his dream that he wrote in Maps of Meaning. And that is really disturbing. And usually when you're having strange dreams like that, there's like some family issue, some weird, creepy problem. Someone said, Dear Penthouse. Yeah, it's like there's some weird thing going on. And he writes other dreams that are very bizarre. He's naming his daughter after like Mikhail Gorbachev. And there's strange things. Here's another weird thing. You know how he's obsessed with Russia, and Soviet Russia? His daughter's first husband was Russian. So she marries a Russian guy. And that falls apart. And I think she's always trying to like kind of please her dad or something. And then her second husband, whom I met, weirdly enough, her second husband is named Jordan. I don't know if that's some kind of unconscious thing, but it's really weird. I don't think I'd want to marry someone who's had the same name as my dad. I think that would be weird. But hey, maybe I'm being like really immature. I don't know. That's just me. It's bizarre. Whew. But I mean, it's hard for me to really tell you in a nutshell. Like this book, you really have to go through with it. He goes through, tells you how he thinks that Jordan's a narcissist, that Jordan Peterson has mental health issues as a psychologist. And we know that psychologists often go in because they're messed up and they're trying to fix other people. And by fixing themselves, hopefully they'll fix themselves. This happens a lot of times. I took some psychology classes when I was studying English and history in university, and I realized right away that most of them were messed up, and I thought, God, I better get out of here and go work on myself. You know, they're trying to diagnose everybody, and most of the people I knew that had their degrees were really messed up. There was one lady who... She was a child psychologist in the town of Comox. She stalked my son at a birthday party because she wanted to background check my son because she didn't want her kid near anyone she didn't know. And she drove around stalking my son while they were walking to McDonald's from the birthday party. And her son was always on the PS4 talking about cocaine and drug dealers and stuff. And I'm like, what the heck is wrong with these people? I'm always suspicious. Psychology in and of itself, and you know that Jordan Peterson loves young. He loves Carl Jung, but Freud is worse. And a lot of these guys are frauds. Like Freud was covering up a lot of, how shall we say, a lot of the women were coming to Freud and telling him that their fathers were essaying them and having incestuous relations with them. And so and so he kind of did it about face and said, "Oh no, that he covered up for these formidable men and said, "No, nothing's happening. Their daughter's just forming a fantasy about them." When in fact there was something happening. And this is you're seeing Peterson use psychology as a weapon now. And this happened in Soviet Russia, and he probably knows this. He's actually diagnosing and calling people who disagree with him as psychopaths. Well, Freud did the same thing. He used psychology to call these women mentally ill who were telling the truth about their fathers essaying them or having incestuous relations with them. This and it just boggles my mind how a lot of people in psychology are kind of creepy. And they have more problems than you'd really want them to have. Now, he goes on to talk about how Jordan Peterson has an issue with stats. In one example, Jordan Peterson, in his book, he declares this. He declares that 1/3 of people do not take their medication. Basically, they're not fulfilling their prescription, so they're not taking their medications. I think that's the quote. And he uses some statistics to back this up. But rightfully so. We got a comment. Ted Kaczynski from Sean Thompson. Ted Kaczynski was right about psychology and propaganda. Oh yeah, they go hand in hand. And he probably knew that because he's the MK Ultra at Harvard. Anyways, back to the whole stats thing. You have to know how to read stats and understand them. I'm not saying that I do, but what Jordan Peterson does that here is he says that 1/3 of people don't take their medications. And he uses that. He has a rule in the book called "Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping." And in brackets, he says, "Why won't you just take your damn pills?" And then he says, like 1/3 of people don't take their pills. They don't fulfill the prescription and take their medication. The study actually doesn't say that 1/3 of people don't take them. What it says is 1/3 of prescriptions don't get filled. That's completely different. And I think in America, only about 20% of the population is on medications continuously, like always. And so what that means is for various different reasons, the prescription didn't get filled. It doesn't mean 1/3 of the people aren't taking them. It just means 1/3 of prescriptions that are written doesn't get filled. Maybe it got canceled. Maybe they had enough. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe they decided they didn't need it. There's multiple different reasons. Maybe the doctor said, "Hey, whoa, we're going to hold off on that." And this idea that you're not allowed to decide for yourself not to take a prescription that you don't think it's good sounds very MK Ultra-y. Like, you're a bad person if you don't want to take this med that this professional doctor who has dreams about his grandmother's pubic hairs, tells you have to take. How dare you not listen to this doctor who got addicted to benzodiazepines and his daughter was on depression medications and they have a crazy stringent diet? How dare you not listen to him? So he equates treat yourself to someone you're responsible for, to taking your medication. That's really weird. And when he wrote this book, 12 Rules of Life, he was on benzodiazepines, by the way. I call them pill pushers. Like I used to say, is your doctor a pill pusher? Do they go right to pills? Like, do they? Because that's suspect. Because I'm sure most people's problems isn't that they don't have enough benzodiazepines. They don't have a lack of SSRI issue. Those things are MK Ultra. They're meant to control us. Most they have problems because life is hard. There's issues. There's issues with their family. They're nervous about something. They have anxiety. They have PTSD. It's not, and some of these pills might help them, but a lot of these pills destroy people's lives. So he gets stats wrong. He gets stats wrong continuously. We're going to pop in. I got to have a little voice break. So we're going to pop into another video I have. Let's get through this. Oh, yeah. Jordan Peterson. Where do we got it here? I know I have another. This is Richard Dawkins. Now, he's an evolutionary biologist. He's an atheist, but he actually says what he thinks about Jordan Peterson. So let's listen to Richard talk about what he felt about Jordan Peterson.
You had a conversation with Jordan Peterson. He's very well known at the moment for talking about religion. And he comes at it from this completely different perspective to, I imagine, the perspective that most of your previous Christian opponents, not that Jordan Peterson is strictly a Christian, have come at it from. And I wonder what you make of him and his approach.
I enormously respect his courage in standing up to the Canadian laws about free speech. I hugely respect that and value him for that reason. When he talks about religion, I think it's bullshit. I think that he doesn't make any sense at all. I think he's impressing people by using language they don't understand, rather like Deepak Chopra, where people think, oh, it must be terribly profound because I can't understand it. I think the most egregious example of that is where he looks at works of primitive art, works of tribal art, where he shows things like two snakes coiling around each other and says, well, they must have had some primitive, primeval knowledge of DNA. Perhaps they looked into their own cells in some sense and saw the DNA. And that is sheer bullshit, and I told him so.
You had a conversation.
Who knows? Who knows? We don't know that. I have no idea. There was this, I have to go look because he actually quoted him, and there was this one. Okay, so here it is. Here's this quote, and it was in reference to if the victim of oppression, this isn't his quote, if the victim of oppression has power over his oppressor merely by resisting oppression, at what point does the lowly 10 survival and advancement transform into bullying and oppression that is evitable in the domain of tyrants? So he says, Peterson is evidently aware of his problem, although he encourages reader to climb out of the bottom. Peterson also directly warns against rising too high. That's not the quote, actually. There was one. It was so bizarre. And I'm trying to find it here, but you can see Richard Dawkins thinks he's full of it. It was really, it was so bibble babble. It was just, I was like, what does this mean? What is going on? I just didn't even understand what he meant. It's what I'm telling you. When you read it, you're like, huh? What? And I'll read it to you, and you can tell me if you know what it means, because it sounded like word salad to me, and I'm going to try to find this. I had it marked off. But sometimes I lose the stuff where I said, oh, I want to tell them about this, and then I lose it. And the second half, we're going to get into a little bit about, I've seen people stream, you can check out Candace Owens talks about him on her last show that she did before she went on maternity leave, but we're going to get into the Hodge twins. They actually do a conversation about him with their producer, and it's quite funny. Yeah, I can't find that quote. That's really frustrating because I was like, huh? What's going on here? It was kind of like him saying we or do or what. Comment in the show says most people's problem is just the natural response to modernity. Yeah, they can't keep up with it. They're just like stressed out. They have to work. And a lot of our problems are more about anxiety that we make up in our head. They're not real yet. We're just freaking out about them. Excuse me. I'm just really would like to find this quote, because when I read it, I was sitting here reading it and I said to my husband, I'm like, what does this mean? And I read it out loud and he was like, I have no idea. It just didn't make any sense. So there's a lot of people who have become aware of it slowly. And a lot of the young men who were following Jordan Peterson, once they realized he was on benzodiazepines and he was being nasty, they started to notice other things. Like for me, when the benzodiazepine came up, I was like, I always willing to give someone a chance to correct things and tell the truth. But him and his daughter kept lying. His daughter lies about plastic surgery. She tells you, "Oh, I look different because it's a different camera." It's all like I had. You notice they use their allergies and their food stuff to cover for a lot of things. They used the allergies and food stuff to cover that he was going through benzodiazepine withdrawal. She used the allergy stuff and food stuff just to explain why she wasn't on her podcast for 3 or 4 months. It's because she had had plastic surgery. Literally, the minute she came back, you could see her face was totally different in an exceptional way. In an absolute exceptional way. It did just lie. And then his wife was seriously ill. She was very ill. And then she says that she got better. It was some kind of rare form of cancer. She says she got better from praying and doing Catholic prayer or something like that. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Wow. Let's see. I just can't find it. And I had it marked for you guys too. And I was going to say it, but I can't find it. So I don't know. Maybe while we, look at the Hodge video, we'll be able to check it out, but I cannot find that quote. And it was compelling because it's showing you what a master narrative this guy that he weaves. He weaves a master narrative. He really does. So here we go. All right. Cernovich is a big critic. I've got a couple of stuff here from Cernovich. He's a huge critic of Jordan Peterson because he actually realizes that Jordan Peterson is just basically himself climbing to the top and kicking everybody else while he gets up there. And one of the things that Vox Day points out, because of Jordan Peterson's narcissism that he feels that he has, and I'm not diagnosing him with anything, is that 12th rule for life is his coping mechanism. And not everybody needs, it's his way of controlling everything around him because he's got some serious issues that not everybody has. But he doesn't realize that. He doesn't recognize that not everybody has these issues, and he misquotes stuff so badly that like these studies, and not all of his followers look up the studies. I didn't look up the studies. I wasn't buying his books, by the way. I would just watch some of his lectures online, and now I think I'm going to go back if I want to even waste the time. But some of the stuff didn't make sense. I also was skeptical when I started to hear him describe personality disorders. I was like, what is he talking about? He was describing borderline, and I'm like, that's not what borderline is. Go look at the DSM-5. There's 9 criteria of borderline. It's really easy. You can tell what borderline is, and he described it in the most ridiculous way. It was like he didn't even know what a personality disorder now. But now all you hear him say is the dark tetrad, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism describe Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. And Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes don't even remotely come close to the dark triad. Someone like Stalin is the dark tetrad or triad. He's just totally slippy, sloppy, misdiagnosing people to villainize them, to shut them up. And it's crazy. So Cernovich said that Stefan Molyneux put Jordan Peterson on the map. When the censors came for Molyneux, Jordan was too busy cashing checks from all the users that YouTube sent him because Jordan posed zero threat to the deep state. To the contrary, he actually pushed the deep state agenda. And Vox Day says this too, that Jordan Peterson really is a liberal that was pushing the agenda. That's why he does all the word salad to confuse people, because he really was pushing deep state agenda. He just tricked people by saying those rules, like he was helping them structure their lives, and he's helping them go against all of this gender stuff and free speech control. But now we see he actually wants to control speech. It's all just bibble babble. He actually is a globalist. He just has the globalism in a certain way that he sees fit. And it's a little bit different from, say, the gender stuff. This person here says, I remember when the intellectual dark web and their adjuncts, that's what they called them in those days, turned on Stefan and showed their true colors, even ones he had on free domain radio before it was banned off YouTube. Stefan Molyneux had anti-war, peaceful parenting, and removal of abusive people from your life, including family. It was very powerful than anyone realized until they brought the hammer down on him. Deeply missed. And Jordan Peterson, with his creepy, crazy form of psychology, which is everything's doom and gloom and oh my god, and Jordan Peterson actually exhibits this whole thing where you keep in with a dysfunctional family. He totally threw Stefan Molyneux under the bus, totally did. Here's Cernovich again saying Jordan Peterson is accusing people who disagrees with him on foreign wars of being mentally ill. This is Stasi level stuff. He also wants to tie Christ as king to sociopathy and terrorism. This man is working for demons. Now, I want to give you this. This video shows you how many accounts were banned on YouTube. Jordan Peterson was never banned. He was banned at the end. He was banned at the very end and then put back on. So he did get banned at the end. But this is showing you, like, even Donald Trump was banned. A lot of people was banned. But Jordan Peterson kept strong on YouTube. He was never banned. And he's done really well. He has over 8 million followers. But I feel like some of them are fake because he doesn't even compare to Candace Owens' views. Nicholas Fuentes, one of the people that Jordan Peterson basically calls a demon and a rat, says Jordan Peterson used to be an almost messianic figure for disaffected young men, universally beloved and admired for his thoughtfulness and good humor. It's tragic watching him immolate his legacy in recent years. I actually think that Jordan Peterson, like I said, long before, someone said Cernovich is a big-time suspect himself. Well, he could be, maybe. But I think Jordan Peterson, just think about it. He's in the university. And by the way, he actually studied at one of the universities in Canada, McGill, that's linked to MK Ultra. I'm not saying he's in with MK Ultra, but he was learning in the psychology department. And there was a very famous doctor, he was able to control people because he was so witty and charming. And they thought he was so intelligent and he was the world's best. He was an MK Ultra doctor, jacking them up with LSD in a time nobody knew what LSD was. So he was schooled at McGill. So I'm not saying he's MK Ultra. I'm just saying there's an interesting link there. That's all I'm saying. But think about it. He's in a university. He's been schooled in a liberal way. I'm telling you, all his family are liberal. You're on Vancouver Island, you're going to be liberal. A lot of them are liberal. He's the one who comes from a small town. He's saying all this stuff in his book is about him. That's why he calls this Jordanetics. He wrote this in 2018. And we're seeing what he says about Jordan Peterson manifesting right out there. His own mental illness. He's projecting. When he calls you a psychopath, he's projecting his own psychopathy. He's literally supporting a psychopath, right? He's totally projecting 100%. I find it impossible that he came out of this sort of liberal type of university and wasn't, at some level, a liberal. I find it hard. I don't think, and just his daughter's behavior, his fancy suits, and the way he's behaving in caricature, he doesn't say, I'm a conservative. He also spoke heavily against Donald Trump. Like, he was all for Mike Pence running for president in 2024. After 2020, even before 2020, he was speaking out against Kavanaugh, saying he should step down because he's a rapist. So excuse my language, I shouldn't say that on YouTube, and Kavanaugh was innocent. He was always presenting one thing, trying to say he was for free speech, and he was inserting all these very liberal stuff all along, and nobody saw it because they were wrapped up with his word salad. He was Mike Pence. He interviewed Chris Christie, was pro him. He was totally stabbing against Donald Trump the entire time, but nobody really saw it. He also criticized Donald Trump because Donald Trump didn't do the primary debates. Donald Trump didn't have to. He knew he was going to win. He was also attending all these scammy court cases. So he was always pushing in a very strange way in American politics, which I find really odd that he's doing that. And now he's here in America, living here because he got the kick in the ass in Canada. And and he's meddling in American politics again on behalf of Netanyahu. He's actually pushing against Americans, basically calling them psychopaths. So he's always been doing this devious stuff where he's the ratty weasel guy he says everybody else is. He's throwing everybody under the bus, climbing his lobster ass to the top. It's so crazy. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit of I like these guys. They're funny guys. It's the Hodge twins, and they are talking about Jordan Peterson meltdown. They get into some political stuff, but we're going to listen to the Jordan Peterson type, and then we're going to wrap it up. The good thing, though, guys, is people are speaking out. People are speaking out against Jordan Peterson and all of this stuff, and they're pushing back against this, and support of Israel is getting lower. And I sometimes think that Israel is kind of a proxy for the United States because it can't exist without the U.S. It's got all the U.S. It's stolen U.S. Sort of nuclear powers, but it also serves as a U.S. proxy to get into the Middle East as well. There's a weird thing going on here, and people are like figuring it out, and they're done with it. They don't want this stuff. They don't want all these wars at all. So here we go. Let's check out the Hodge twins and what they say about Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. Welcome to episode 63. Yeah. Got a special show for y'all. Just us, though. No guest. Yeah, just us and our producer. He's anti-Semitic, I gotta warn you. He is Palestinian.
If he's Palestinian, he's a Semite.
All right.
He's American.
Born in Jersey, all right?
Yeah, that's what the white people want to hear. I'm not Palestinian, I'm American. Yeah,
They're going to come for me, man. They're going to come for me.
Yeah, man. So what we got going, I understand Jordan Peterson got some scandal around him right now, right?
Yeah, well, we got a few viral topics that we're going to go over today, get your perspective on it. A few things that y'all haven't covered either, so I would love to just see your perspective on these things. And yeah, definitely Jordan Peterson, he's been making the rounds lately with a lot of crazy stuff that he's been saying, but he hasn't always been like this. Jordan Peterson to me is
he's an intelligent guy. Yeah.
He is.
Hey.
To me, it's very disappointing.
We're going to pause this because I got to do commentary. He has always been like this. People think there's a change, and it looks like there was, like after he went through COVID, after he shut down and went weird and started doing the suits and stuff like that and got in. Everyone thinks that the Daily Wire. What is happening is Jordan Peterson's always been a narcissist. It's just the more power that he collects and the higher up he got, the more the mask slips, the more the fake mask that he's presenting before starts to fall off, and you start to see this guy. He's pretty much just climbing the to the top, trying to be rich, trying to be whatever. And like I said, there's nothing liberal about them. There's nothing liberal about his daughter. She's conservative about them. Sorry. They're more liberal than anything. And I think he is trying to be conservative because that's the audience that was responding to his stuff about freedom of speech and whatever against the Trudeau government. But his daughter literally looked like dressed like a hooker for her wedding, you know? So they're not conservative at all. They're very liberal. Very liberal. And so they think, oh, he's just changed. He hasn't changed. He's always been that way. You go and check out Jordanetics, and guys, the playlist where the guy talks about this, if you don't want to read the book, is in the description of the show. It should be in the description notes right on there. You can go check out Vox Day. He tells you Jordan Peterson is a globalist. He's a liberal. He's always has been. He could have been PSYOP right from the beginning. So they just don't see that. Okay, but they're going to talk some more. Let's go into it.
Disappointing because he used to be a voice for the voiceless. He used to have like a lot of great insight and a lot of great speeches, viral.
Word salad. It was word salad. Unfortunately, we got tricked because if you listen to him, you can get lured in. Once you read him and read what he says, it gets weird.
Speeches, you know, like this one right here, for instance.
Look around and see what bugs you in your room. Do I like this room? No, it bugs me. Why? It's dusty there and the carpet's dirty and that corner's kind of ugly and the light there isn't very...
So basically, he tells you what every mother tells you, clean your room. Except for he has the persona of a professor, so you're like, oh, I better do what he says because it's an appeal to authority.
Very good. Okay, pick a problem. Pick a solution to it that you know would help, that you could do, that you would do. Would you clean one drawer? Find out. Pick something and fix it. So then all of a sudden you get all these things in order.
Thanks,
It's like,
Lieutenant.
look at this. I've got some room to play here. Then maybe you're not depressed.
So he's got that good advice, clean your room, forget about your
stoicism.
Stoicism, exactly. And, you know, good advice here, especially.
Things get to terrible places.
Gotta pause. There's nothing stoic about Jordan Peterson. That's an act. Look at his suits. Look at it, how he's living high off the hog. He's not stoic at all. He's very liberal. It's an act. He's not stoic. Stoic people don't waltz around in suits and I've had people report that they spent $400 just to attend one of his shows, right? And they said once they got there and they started really analyzing him with a more critical eye, he was just doing bibble babble. It didn't make sense. He had nothing of substance to say, and it was just like an act. It was like they said, going to Deepak Chopra. It was like going to, what's his name there? Darn his name. He's like one of those guru speakers. It was like being like that, but he was sitting there with his homely looking wife. You know, it wasn't this major revelation or revealing anything factual to them at all.
One tiny step at a time. You know, if I encroach on you and I'm sophisticated about it, I'm going to encroach 2 millimeters. I'm going to encroach right to the point where you start to protest. Then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to wait. Then you're going to calm down. Then I'm going to encroach again, right to the point where you protest. Then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to wait. And I'm just going to do that forever. And before you know it, you're going to be back 3 miles from where you started, and you'll have done it one step at a time. And then you'll go, oh, how'd I get here? And the answer was, well, I pushed you a little farther than you should have gone, and you agreed. And so then I pushed you a little farther than you should have gone again, and you agreed. And if anybody's interested in this sort of process, and this is a horrifying book, if you want to read about how this process works, you can read a book called Ordinary Men by Robert Brown. Things get to...
So what do y'all...
That sounds like what Jordan Peterson does slowly to everybody who listens to him. Keeps pushing you. And of course, I mean, he's selling all sorts of crazy, hacky, lunatic stuff. Here we go.
I'll think about that insight. What do you think about his advice, his classic stuff?
Always seen him as like a father figure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Go read his books and you'll see he's a creepy father figure that names his daughter after Soviet leaders.
And an intelligent guy, and it's someone young men can look up to. Yeah. Right. So what exactly did he say that got him in a lot of hot water?
So he's gone from being that guy, that really like important guy with the important voice and inspiring stuff, to pretty much since October 7th. Okay, here we go. Here comes the Palestinian.
Yes, since October 7th, because he's there to guard, but he was interviewing Netanyahu and he was in for that long before. He's probably been gearing up to attack Candace Owens for a long time because for whatever reason, Daily Wire just really wants to attack Candace Owens, even though Candace Owens is still friends with Michael Knowles and Matt, from the Daily Wire. She still is friends with them. They never had a problem. But Jordan Peterson, he's out for the blood. So you know he's big in with them. Like they're big in. And one of the things that Vox Day says in this book, and he highlights, is that a lot of the people you see like Ben Shapiro, because Jordan Peterson will say there's no such thing as a preference to the Jews and stuff. They have high IQs, but that's not necessarily true. Because he points out that Ben Shapiro himself was not a top journalist at all. He was way down on the bottom. He was picked. They pick them and they push their own kind. It doesn't matter what their IQ are. The whole idea that they're all geniuses is BS. There's a lot of white Christians who have way better readership, better intelligence, better writing skills, better analysis skills that they don't get picked because they don't have the right message. Not everybody who's out there who's famous has been, is a genius. Sometimes they're picked because they say the right things, they do the right messaging, they're the right whatever. And Ben Shapiro is not the genius that he says he is. Not in the same way anyways. Not merely. A lot of people are put in there because they're pushing the right message, and Bucks Day highlights that really clearly in this.
Pretty much, and since October 7th, all he really does is like cry and shill for Israel. So here's
Jordan Peterson was crying and breaking down, having nervous breakdowns, and they're going to show you that the uncomfortable nervous breakdowns. Who wants to go to a psychologist that's crying and sobbing his lungs out on a podcast? I'm like, gee, I don't know if that guy can help me. I think I might have to help him. He seems to be an emotional wreck.
Here's his latest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, here's his latest crying spat, and then I'm going to show you some of the more reckless things that he said when it comes to Christianity.
Oh, okay.
So here he is on Piers Morgan in his latest crying fit.
Because if you tell the truth, what should happen as a consequence of the truth makes itself manifest in the world, and that's the best.
Jordan Peterson doesn't know how to tell the truth. He doesn't know. He has no clue. He's a constant projection.
Possible outcome, but it's also the most adventurous thing that you can do, the most exciting thing you can do, hands down. There's nothing that compares to it. That pathway of maximal responsibility, voluntary responsibility.
They're all uncomfortable. Why is he crying?
And I understand that deeply at a religious level.
See, it's unfortunate.
I'm confused because he doesn't. What religious level? Like, why is he crying? Like, I'm confused. What's going on here?
He just lost his father too, right? Yeah, I know he lost his father a little while
Okay,
back. Yeah.
And I don't want to make fun of him for this too, but he's had like a dependency on SS.
So the thing is here's what I would say. Like, if your father has passed away, that's horrible. I went through that when my grandmother passed away. She was kind of like a mother more than anything. You need to take you would not do interviews if you're an emotional, and you're upset. You would like say, I'm not going to do interviews. Like, I'm not doing this stuff. I have to take some time away. I have to get over this, go through this transition and stuff. You shouldn't be doing. I know it's hard, but it's hard. Like, tough stuff. I mean, compassion for that because I understand it.
SSRIs and benzos and pretty bad drug dependency. And I don't want to make fun of him for that, but it seems like his emotions, his serotonin, he cries at the drop of a hat. It's just like weird.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah,
he had a drug dependency?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Benzos. His daughter goes into a lot of talking about it. Let's hear him again here with Piers Morgan.
And here's the thing. This is why I always said I think that he was a pill pusher, because a lot of doctors are. They just push pills and they don't question it. He should know. He should have some idea what benzodiazepines and pills does because he's a doctor. He should have a concept. But him and his daughter were constantly on these things. They say, depression from diet and all the stuff she has, that might be. I mean, I'm not a professional, but I think a lot of the stuff when you're on these medications, they actually make it worse. And you would think that's why I call these doctors, when one of his rules are treat yourself, the way you treat others. In other words, take your pills. That's what his rule actually says. Like, look at that. I think he's really muddled and his whole philosophy is crazy because he's kind of like a pill pusher. How about exercise, eating healthy, and no pill pushing? How about I just don't know if this is somebody that I would now, in hindsight, I'm looking at that he's crying all the time on TV. He was crying long before this, like years ago. You can find footage of him crying, like in 2020, 2021 in an interview. It's like, well, have you cleaned your own house? Have you made your own bed, Jordan? Have you tend to your own mental health? Obviously, the answer is no. No. And only someone who is kind of crazy would actually go out and contradict their own rules and position themselves and then use this instability and call it a spiritual thing instead of take time away and clean their own room like they tell everybody else to do. It's bizarre.
Symbolic world on which our productive and peaceful culture
I think
was
Piers
properly
Morgan is
founded.
uncomfortable.
And I've seen the effect of communicating that to people, thousands of people. And it's a great privilege to serve that role, but it's also...
this is making me wildly uncomfortable.
So overwhelming. You know, I think it is...
Do you know how uncomfortable this is?
Maybe I was ill for quite a long time. And I think that was part of the reason, just seeing this, like this malaise, so...
Jordan, again, he's projecting there. He's talking about a malaise. Remember, his whole concept with his book, 12 Rules to Life, it's to take order out of chaos, like apply order to chaos. So you get order out of the chaotic environment. His whole idea is life is painful, it's horrible, it's suffering, it's all about suffering. He's very doom and gloom. So I think he's projecting a lot. Like he's projecting like everybody's depressed, everybody's this. And he was a champion for young men, but they started to realize that he doesn't follow his own rules. And that's one of the reasons why people were getting suspicious and didn't like him, because he was a hypocrite. And now he's like I said, the propaganda mouthpiece. You know, how can we... this is the expert. He's crying, having a nervous breakdown, and we're all capable of doing that. We're all capable of breaking down. God knows I've had nervous breakdowns when I had to deal with way too much stress that I could handle. But we're all capable of this, but this shouldn't be the professional that's giving you psychological advice if they have all these problems and they're breaking down on Piers Morgan.
Okay, he's saying a lot of words. What the hell is he talking about?
I don't even know what the hell he's talking about. But
it's word salad. They're confused too. They don't know what he's talking about. What do they mean? This malaise. Jordan Peterson's projecting some kind of psychosis, something that he's got, and the twins are like, what is he saying? That's what I'm telling you. It doesn't make sense.
But it's just sort of the perspective now is he's just like this crying, unstable dude.
Yeah, he used to be this strong, stern dude. Yeah. Concise.
Jordan Peterson's never been concise. That's a lie. The strong dude is an act. The tough father thing is an act. And look at who they debate. Like, he goes and debates who Destiny. That guy's so easy to... Destiny's a depraved pig. Of course he can do that. Of course he can. But he's never been precise. And the strong father thing was an act. It's an act. Underneath, when you have a narcissist like that, underneath all that stuff, they're cracking, they're crumbling, they're crack-a-lacking, they can't handle it. Underneath that facade was all this stuff and the drug addictions and the family problems. And I read to you that weird dream with his grandmother. That's what's underneath. And I'm assuming he's never dealt with it, because you can't go on to it's bizarre to go into new stuff like that and cry like that.
You would never see him crying or anything.
It's kind of, ever since he hooked up with Daily Wire, he's changed. And here's the big thing that I wanted to show y'all. His opinions on Christ is King.
Uh-oh.
It's a very special phrase that you
now
guys
we're
like
going back.
to get your Christ.
When they go back to Christ is King, this is the Fox interview. He's the stern dad, but he looks kind of empty. He looks like he's just... I don't know. It looks like the demons are taking over and he's going gaga. But yeah, he goes back to stern. He's more in control, I think, in this interview.
On my shirt right now.
Get your Christ is King shirts at officialhodgetwins.com. Show him who the king is. But Jordan Peterson has an issue with Christ is King, and let him tell you himself.
Well, I think the most important thing to do first is to draw a distinction between the political and the psychological, and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian, they use their language to manipulate, they're narcissistic, they want unearned social status and reputation, they're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy and parasitical and predatory, and they're sadistic. So they take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Now, those people also use false cries of victimization, let's say, to manipulate, and they're entitled. They seek vengeance when it's unwarranted, and they protest loudly and make very
Honestly, I think Jordan Peterson is totally projecting here.
public cries for reparations that would be self-serving. Okay, now the way those people operate is they look for what patterns of belief form groups that they can infiltrate and then capitalize on. And that happens on the right. We did a report, the same group, on the use of Christ as king as a
Okay, so he's saying they did a report. My diligent in the chat says Revelations 2:9, Christ is to the synagogue as garlic is to a vampire. Interesting. He's talking about this study. I think what they did with this study, the study was like 10 Jews, one Christian, and an East Indian person. So hardly any Christians. And the one that was a Christian was probably bought and paid for. And they've slapped his name on the study. It's a fake, fraudulent study. It's propaganda. It's trying to say that people who say Christ is king are basically psychopaths, like Stalin, like Hitler. That's what they're trying. They're trying to make that connection because those two people definitely had some kind of weird psychopathy going, and they're trying to make this connection. It's a fraudulent study. It's a terrible study, and it's done by a group linked to the ADL, and they did the same thing in the pandemic time. They said basically these same groups did the study and said, hey, if you don't take a vaccination, you're a dark tetrad, you're a psychopath. So basically now what they're doing is they're using language that's on the internet. You can find people talking about narcissism and personality disorders. So they've taken that language from there because they know people watch this stuff, and they're applying it to their people who oppose their agenda, the globalist agenda. They're like, oh, the dark tetrad. When the irony is these people who are running the stuff, the globalists, are the dark tetrad, not the people complaining about it. That's the irony, guys. That is the irony.
Manipulative strategy by bad actors, hypothetically.
Yeah,
how can you be a bad
like
actor when you say Christ is king? It's impossible.
Bad actor? You mean like you crying on the friggin' radio and then acting like a stern daddy?
Jordan Peterson apparently thinks that you're a bad actor, that you're using it in a bad way.
How would Jordan Peterson know?
He goes on.
I mean, looking back on the past of America, like there was a lot of Christians that did a lot of horrible things to people. And
no offense, but a lot of people have done a lot of horrible things to people all throughout the world. That doesn't mean sitting there saying Christ is king means that you're a bad actor and a psycho. Let's go forward here.
Man, they're like, nah, to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think Christians have a right to exist, Jewish people have a right to exist, and Muslims have a right to exist. Yeah. That's why I see it. Just because my faith, Christ is king, that's not to be derogatory because you have a different faith, a different religion, a different God.
Yeah. And I just think it's weird how they tell
that's censoring speech.
Yeah, and they tell you how to worship.
You know what's really weird? Is they can saying Christ is king is evil, but Jewish people are allowed to say they're the chosen people, and everybody else is like rat shit, dirty, filthy, goyim or whatever they call us. They're allowed to insult Christians and then claim in a very ethno supremacist way that they're the special chosen people, and the rest of us don't even have souls. We're not even human. Go die. That's what they believe. They're allowed to say that. But we can't just say, hey, Christ is king. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Worship Christ, which is a little weird. He keeps going.
Right, and this report identified the same sort of people on the left. But it's not primarily political. They're wolves in sheep's clothing.
So who's he talking about here? He's talking about just anybody that...
I think he's talking about the left. I would think. Actually, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Yeah, because I haven't heard anybody, like only a Jewish person would say Christ is king is anti-Semitic. Only they would say that. They're the only ones putting forth this argument.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he might be talking about people on the left, but that term Christ is king is not anti-Semitic. It's what Christians believe in.
Well, it's what Jewish people think is anti-Semitic, Kevin.
Yeah, but that word doesn't belong to them. Also, there's Semitic people are Muslims.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Why did he get this why it just comes from them, though, the Jews? I don't hear Muslims saying this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could say, like, being against Muslims.
It's because the people who are saying this are Ashkenazi, and they're not actually Semites, and they know it.
You could be considered anti-Semitic, right? Right, but they
I'm anti-Semitic.
Yeah, but it's only anti-Semitic when you use it towards a Jew. When you say it to a Muslim, it's like Jews took that word and own it now, and it no longer applies.
For me, it's like Jordan Peterson is being the thought police. He doesn't know what people's intention are when they say that. And intent is important. It's like he's thought policing and telling people and projecting again, telling people that when they say that, they're being antagonistic and mean, and they don't actually mean it. How the hell does Jordan Peterson get to tell us that? He's a psychologist who is addicted to benzodiazepine, SSRIs, has a weird relation with his daughter. You know, they're like attached to the hip and weird, is money hungry, contradictory. And if you read this book, he lies a lot. He contradicts himself. He's like nonstop lying. He quotes things wrong. He uses his references wrong. He doesn't understand stats. His rules are just crazy. Like, for instance, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Rule number 5. This wording of this rule is more than a little strange and serves as a typical example of Peterson's customary baffle garble. Could he not have simply said, hey, don't spoil your kids? Could he have not simply flipped the double negative to a more straightforward teach your children to behave correctly? No, he couldn't. The reason that rule number 5 is not about raising your children in a way that provides them discipline or civilizes them or helps them become healthy and responsible adults. It is not about raising children at all. In fact, rule number 5 has nothing to do with the behavior of your children in general. Remember, Peterson's target audience are lost millennials, right? They're not even having kids. They don't even have children for the future. His secondary audience, right of center, baby boomers who find meandering mysticism to be comforting echo of the self-help gurus of their misspent youth, are so far past their childbearing years that the device doesn't even make sense. So what does he mean? We know what rule isn't, but we have yet to understand what it really is and why Peterson chose to word it that way. Remember, this is supposed to be one of the 12 most important rules for life. That deceptive technique that Peterson uses here has been utilized in previous rules, but it is in this chapter that he openly advocates using a full-blown rhetorical strategy. What is he advising with this rule? More importantly, as we have now learned, what is the proper message? And you can go on, and what he says is, he's basically telling your kids to be in the middle, unimportant. Don't make them do things that other people don't like. Don't make them be extraordinary. He's actually trying to tell you with that rule, he goes on to it, to tell you to make people be mediocre and extraordinary. It's a way to control. So he's telling you don't do things that make people not like you. He could have just said behave and don't be rude. He said it in that way because he's trying to control people's behavior so they'll be mediocre. Seriously, that's what he's actually saying in the book. It's really bizarre. Keep playing.
That's to Muslims. Yeah, which they are Semitic people as well. Yeah.
And it feels like they want to own the word. They want to own Semite, just like when they want to own Christ as king now. And here's Candace Owens reacting to it. She gives a pretty good breakdown.
Okay. Look at the list of the people who were part of this study. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 individuals who took place in this study.
So this right here, they created a whole press release with this new 4-letter agency that they created, NCRI, and they're literally breaking down with a bunch of scholars that you can see right here why Christ as King is anti-Semitic. And Candace,
that's crazy.
Candace Owens tells you who these people actually are.
The first principal investigator there that you have, Dr. Lee Jussum, is Jewish.
Yeah, we went
Dr.
over
Jordan
this.
Peterson has said he does not believe in Christ. We're going to get to him in a second. So he's unknown, I guess we could say, an atheist perhaps. Reverend Dr. Johnny Moore, who I would refer to as the token.
We've already covered that they're bad.
Yeah.
It's almost like since he started working for Daily Wire, he kind of switched up a little bit.
Like I said,
it's where he took years of branding himself, making a name for himself.
I'm convinced of it now.
And now look, it's like
we don't even. Candace Owens could be compromised.
Overnight. Yeah, you can.
It's messed up. I'm just looking forward, or not really looking forward, but looking in anticipation to like what he's going to say next, what kind of crusade, no pun intended, that he's going to go on next.
Right.
Yeah.
You think he's being manipulated? Maybe he's because he's you said he had a drug dependency. Maybe he's coming off of that, and those people are very fragile, no matter how.
Well, Jordan Peterson was coming off the benzodiazepines like probably at least 3 years ago. So I don't think that's an excuse, but because it might be. I mean, you can experience permanent brain trauma from those kind of drugs. Honestly, you really can. But I think what we have here, like this book says, this book is predicting this and looking at his former writings and everything way back when, and it's basically saying that he is spewing a whole bunch of false heads. Chapter 15, let's just look at one of his rules that he says. Rule number 10, be precise in your speech. He was just speaking there and nobody knew what he says. Every single one of his rules, he can't do. It's like he wrote rules for himself and he's got lots of money now. So he thinks he can just come out of the woodwork and show that he's not doing them, that no one will figure this out. This rule will likely strike the reader of this book as one of the borders on parody, given that we know about the nature of Peterson's carelessness and deceit-filled speech. In case it is not entirely obvious from the various quotes from Peterson's books and public appearances scattered throughout this book, Peterson is almost comically imprecise speaker. He is. He asked 10 different Peterson fans what he means by something, and you will almost invariably provided with at least 8 different definitions. Most of them contradictory. He contradicts himself on the whole idea of chaos and order. He says, no, you don't get order out of chaos. There's another order. There's a more subtle order. It's like, okay, if you have chaos, you don't have order. If you have order, you don't have chaos. He tries to make some kind of philosophy that's like, he thinks he's a genius, but it doesn't make any sense. He's not Socrates, or you know what I mean? Neither am I, by the way. Neither am I. He says, there are a whole host of Peterson memes floating around in the internet, but perhaps the most entertaining is a parody of the Nike ad starring NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, celebrated for his principled decision to kneel during the national anthem played prior to the kickoff football games. The Nike ad says, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. The Peterson parody says, it depends on what you mean by believe. It depends on what you mean by sacrifice. By the way, I don't think that Colin Kaepernick was, noble or anything like that. That might be just the reader's perception. But look what I say. I showed you that video clip where he's like, what do you mean by do? It's basically Jordan Peterson either can't answer a question, or his thoughts are so cluttered or so crazy that that's his technique every single time. And God, I can't find that clip of Sam Harris, because basically Sam Harris calls him out like, okay, like what do you believe? Is there a God? And he's like, well, it depends what you mean. Like, he does the same thing. And Sam Harris catches him on it and says, okay, well, just your best guess. Come on, is God there? Like, he's like, tell us what you mean. But he won't tell you, and he's vague, but yet he wants to have all these debates on God and religion. It's like he likes the idea of being a debater and being this intelligent thing more than he actually wants to do the work to be that, right? Do you see what I mean? That's what it feels like. And I'm no genius, like scholar or anything like that. Not even close. But there's some things that he says where I'm like, what does he mean? He uses young a lot, and I think he misuses young. Let's see if we can find some other stuff here. Yeah, it's a great book. My jaw just came in and laid on the floor. Whew, I think. All right, here we go. I'm trying to find these quotes. It's just, it's so crazy. Okay. Yeah, and he highlights a lot of his own dysfunctional relationships. That he lived with a crazy friend who was crazy and eventually committed suicide. Now that isn't necessarily his fault, or sometimes we've all had friends who were. I have friends who are mentally unstable, but I wouldn't let them live with me. That's for sure. That doesn't necessarily mean you're bad, but it certainly puts into question. It's interesting stuff. And I'm really trying to find some of the quotes where he actually doesn't make any sense at all. It is just pure craziness. Yeah, Diligent says, let's be honest, he learned this behavior in the H camps and at the Sina, you know what? Yeah, perhaps. Maybe he is. I mean, a lot of people he's blocked people for calling him Jordan Peterson or whatever. No, I don't think it's that people don't like that. People in America don't like someone coming in and telling them that they can't have free speech and threatening their freedom of speech and who to vote for and what wars to get into. They're pulling out all the stops. And Jordan Peterson, if he's backing up these wars, he must be a globalist. That's all there is to it. Only a globalist would back up these wars. And they're, I was saying this to my husband, they are focusing on all of our own insecurities. So they know they were whittling people into that war in Ukraine. A lot of lefties were supporting it because they believe Russia bad. But on the other side, they're trying to get you to go to war with Iran because they know a lot of these boomers believe that there's all these terrorists coming after them, and they don't realize that most of the terrorists over in Iran and Iraq were created by our governments, and then they bomb the crap out of these countries, and then they the people are displaced and they bring them here, they bring them to our countries, and then we have to deal with them. But a lot of people, they're using our own the propaganda we've been put in our heads on either side to basically push us into war and get us to support basically global dominance, to get into Ukraine, to get into Russia, to get through, to use Israel through Gaza, to get into Iran. Those are the two countries they want to get into. And so that's what in reality this is all about. And everything else is jibber jabber. Jordan Peterson guilting us out and trying to make us look like psychopaths when he's bawling his eyes out on TV like a crazy lunatic. I'm not the one crying on Piers Morgan. I'm not the one who was on benzodiazepines. I'm not the one who only eats steak strips and water. And I'm not the one who goes on Joe Rogan and lies and says I had an allergic reaction to apple cider vinegar and creates this. He literally lies and says he was awake for 25 days straight. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The record's 11. He just lie after lie. His daughter, dressed like a floozy, sleeps with Andrew Tate and then says she's a leader of the conservatives. These guys are all liberal globalists. We've been had. Absolutely had. God, I really want to find this. I'm going to keep playing this. I'm going to look for this. I'm going to let you guys listen to the twins a little bit more, and I'm going to look for some really weird quotes of his.
How intelligent you are.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, too.
Because him emotional, it looks like he's going through withdrawals.
He has no control over his emotions as a man. That's a huge red flag.
And it's the antithesis of all the other stuff that he used to preach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Strength, power.
Yeah.
Manly.
Yeah. People always, especially people on the left, they always said he was an angry person. He looks anything but angry now.
Yeah. He's very
angry at Christians, it seems.
Yeah. Crying? That's
crying, all kinds of stuff. Man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I came across a clip on Facebook. I was reading. I said, "Wow, that was an unusual take. I wouldn't expect this from him." And I was reading the comments, and it was like 99% didn't agree with him. Just goes to show you, no matter how smart and intelligent you are, you're only human.
Yeah, well, people don't want their faith to be questions, and people who are of faith and are, really down with it and really serious about it don't want to be told how to worship either.
Yeah, yeah. The only religion doesn't put up with this bull crap is the Muslims.
Oh, yeah. They
Christians get kicked around all over the globe, and we don't say anything.
We need a Christian jihad. No.
Don't say that shit. Don't give them reason. Okay, I got the quote. I found it. Staying awake for 25 days is only possible with math. Well, I don't know. I think he just lies so much. So here is the quote, what Jordan Peterson actually said. He says, God is the mode of being you value the most, the spirit that is trying to elevate being. It makes everything come together, the truthful speech that rectifies pathological hierarchies, how we imagine and collectively represent the existence and action, conscious across time, the selection mechanism which judges which men are worthy. What the fuck does that even mean? So now, if people say, you're just stupid, Melissa, you don't understand that because you're dumb. You're not as elevated as Jordan Peterson. You're just not so bright. But that is gobbledygook. And Vox Day says, collectively, those statements can clearly be seen as pure bafflegabble. String them together and you'll see that they're entirely nonsensical. A truthful speech is a selection mechanism that rectifies pathological hierarchies, which is how we imagine the existence of consciousness trying to... Well, that's nonsense. Yeah, he won't define truth. He babbles and he strings all these big words together. And if you notice, when he's talking, he'll pause. Like, let me think about this. It's like a preacher. They're like, I'm calling the Holy Spirit. He's thinking, because he's thinking at what bullshit he can string together. And I also suspect that he might use the crying as a weapon, which is so woke and lefty. He might actually cry as a weapon. So people are like, that poor man, he feels the spirit and he's having such a religious experience. He just has to cry. I honestly think he might be weak. He might be having a nervous breakdown. He might be drugs, but he could also be weaponizing tears, which is crazy because it makes me uncomfortable. Does it not make any of you uncomfortable to watch him cry like that? It makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, dude, go get yourself together. Like, you're supposed to be the therapist. I know we're supposed to have compassion for people. If someone's crying, you should take care of them, sure. But good Lord, you're on a news. You're on the news. Come prepared and emotionally clear. If you can't be, you need to take a vacation. Maybe he needs to go see other therapists, because that happens sometimes too. If you're into therapy, you actually need to go to therapy yourself because it's so stressful to deal with other people's problems. Maybe Jordan Peterson needs to go do that. Let's listen a little bit longer.
We got to bring the Templar Knights back. Is what we need.
I've noticed, I would say probably over the last month, I'm seeing a lot of anti-Muslim stuff from conservatives all over the place. It's almost like they're getting paid to do it.
It is kind of...
I don't know if they're getting paid to do it, but there's certainly, I told you, there's propaganda in that aspect too, because boomers and maybe even Gen Xers have been fed that since probably Jimmy Carter, after Jimmy Carter and the fall of Iraq and all that stuff, and Iran and whatnot. We've been fed this whole narrative that there's terrorists coming in. I mean, look at 9/11. People are terrified that some jihadi Muslim is going to come and blow things up. And we know that it's probably way more complicated than that. And we also know who is creating the terrorists: Israel, United States, CIA, Mossad. And there might be other people who create terrorists, but those are two of the biggies. So there's a lot of people who are afraid that there's all these terrorists. And I'm not a fan of Islam and Muslim. It's not my favorite religion, but, and there are some big problems with it. There's some huge problems. No doubt that I have with it. but they're feeding on those fears that we have.
Kind of weird how it's coming out of nowhere, right?
It's coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see a lot of pushback from conservatives about, hey, they just open up a what you call that church's mosque?
Mosque.
He said they got a mosque. This is the first Muslim elected official. They're taking over our country. I'm like, man, this is weird. Yeah, I mean, do you know how many Jewish people are in our government?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, what? Okay. I think it's more Jewish people in our government than Christians.
Personally, I think it should all be Christians. That's just my opinion. So we're going to wrap that up here because I've been a couple hours, but it was interesting to see their conversation about it. I didn't want to go through the whole thing or anything like that, but it was interesting to see their conversation. And, you know, it's hard for me to go through this entire book. Go into the notes here. Go down into the notes in the description, and there is a huge playlist by Vox Day, and he goes through this if you don't have time to read the book. I've gone through over half the book. It talks about his psychopathy or narcissism. Now, I'm not diagnosing Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's analyzing him. He's a journalist. He's quite intelligent man. Then he goes through each chapter and analyzes each chapter and what's really wrong with them. Like, rule number 9, assume the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Well, Jordan Peterson, seems you've forgotten that because they're now doing an appeal to professionals, an appeal to, people who have degrees. And you and I, we don't know anything now. We need to shut up and not talk about things that we don't know. Because have you been there, as Douglas Murray would say? Have you been there? If you haven't been there, how could you know? How could you know? You know, so he violates that rule. Totally 100%. Just go to rule number 8, tell the truth or at least don't lie. Well, we know he violates that rule constantly, him and his entire family. And personally, his wife, she's a nice lady, but I think she just enables him. Oh, my dog and my cat are fighting. They're playing. They've decided to come out here and say, hey, get off. Rule number 7, pursue what's meaningful, not what expedient. Jordan Peterson violates that. He's like hawking products left, right, and center now. He's not pursuing meaningful stuff. He's pushing propaganda, in my opinion. He goes through each rule. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Well, Jordan Peterson, I'm afraid you fail at your own 12 rules for life. You guys, 100%, he fails. I don't know what else to say, but that the guy is talking in circles and speaking nonsense. So check out that link in the description if you want to check out more about this book. If you don't have time to read it, you can order this book. I got to go finish it. I'm over halfway through. It's great. We're going to be here on Thursday. Like I said, I'm going to do Sundays for the show and then maybe a guest on Thursdays. I'll have to revisit things. I'm doing other projects and things like that. But Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, Walter Bosley is coming back on the show. So be here. It's going to be a really good show. And then we're going to do a Sunday, Monday show for Mother's Day. And I have a guest on Monday next week. And then we'll be gone. So I appreciate you guys. Just go to the website. That is genxonx.com. You can go there. You can also give me a one-time donation. There's PayPal. There is Cash App. There is Venmo. You can support the show that way. All the links are there. Everything that you would need to follow the live stream or the podcast at genxonx.com. That's genxonx.com. I thank you guys very much for being on the show with me today and analyzing Jordan Peterson. Grab the book, go to that link, look at it more because he's talking word salad. And the man who says he's against globalists and he's against ideology and against all this stuff actually has been pushing an ideology all along without, properly quoting things, properly using stats. He's not properly using research links. Most of it is his own ideology and philosophy of life. He is projecting. So that's all I want to say today, guys. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great day. I will see you guys again on Thursday. Don't miss Walter Bosley. All right. See ya. Ciao.